Jeff Martin, welcome back to Australian Musician.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Today we're going to be talking about a few things, including your upcoming tour playing the songs of David Bowie, but mainly I wanted to catch up and talk about some of your wonderful instruments. Um,
Yeah.
before we go there, tell me, what was your first ever guitar?
Um, my first ever guitar was, well, actually, it wasn't a guitar. It was a ukulele.
Okay.
My mother bought me a ukulele when I was 4 years old, and I actually started picking out melodies on it at 4 years old. So I got it in tune, was starting to pick out things that I heard on the radio. And then, so my parents saw that I had an aptitude, and my mother's brother, um, my Uncle Larry, he taught me my first chords on the acoustic guitar when I was around 6 years old, and kind of went from there. So my parents bought me just a very cheap acoustic guitar to learn on, but my uncle had this big Gibson jumbo acoustic that at the time seemed like it was like this big on me, right? But so I would every time I'd get to go over to his house, I was just that guitar was on my lap all the time.
Yeah. I know you've told the story many times before, but I think it's apt for the chat today. The moment you became intrigued by Middle Eastern sounds.
Yeah, well, and the story goes, it was as a young child, I was really into the early rock and roll of the Beatles, like the simpler stuff. She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and all that stuff. And for my 11th birthday, my cousin, who happened to be my Uncle Larry's son, he was about 4 years older than me and a bit of a stoner. And he said, if you really want to like hear the real Beatles, so he bought me Sergeant Pepper's for my birthday. And when I put that on and I heard the George Harrison track, Within You, Without You, it was like something changed, something clicked, something was remembered in my psyche. I don't know if we're talking about reincarnation, past lives, whatever, but it was like instantly I was so familiar with that music. And it was like I had just found like a lost friend. And that started my journey. So my father would give me an allowance every weekend. We'd go across the Ambassador Bridge to Detroit, and there was this one record store that had a really good world music section. So I would buy one record, a week, and usually I would just buy it from the cover. If there was a weird instrument on it, I wanted to hear it. You know what I mean? And so that was, that's how I got into things like sitar and sarod and saz and just Turkish music, Indian music, Moroccan music. It was all from that, from listening to that Beatles song.
Yeah. You've traveled to places where a lot of these instruments have their origins. Was
Yeah.
there one trip that was particularly significant to you?
I would say my trip to Morocco, spent time in Fez and spent time in Marrakesh, and it felt like home. It was very strange. Like even walking through the Medina of Fez, I felt like I knew my way around already, and just the music, the people, the food. Morocco, I could easily live there as well.
Yeah, I imagine you've met a lot of masters of these instruments. What kind of advice has been passed down to you from musicians, Middle Eastern musicians, that it's been invaluable to you?
It's basically it's studying the folk music of the countries, like the folk music of Morocco or of Turkey. And well, Indian classical music, plays a big part, so that's great for composition. Um, yeah, it's just essentially it's just listening to the best and trying to take it from there.
Yeah. Um, your solo album, Seven Deadly Sins in 2023, was an opportunity to return to these exotic instruments. It sounds like that was quite an emotional album for you to make. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it was emotionally taxing because I had never really written towards a concept before. And as far as the seven deadly sins are concerned, I've probably experienced them all in one way or another. So it was kind of revisiting, past situations and trying to capitalize on, some history there. But it was a very cathartic experience making that record. And especially, like my house is almost like a museum of world music instruments and especially the studio, but they have been sitting dormant for quite some time. So it was a challenge to bring them all back to playability. Finding strings for some of these instruments is not the easiest task. So, but got there in the end, and yeah, it's a record I'm very proud of.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of these instruments. I see to your right there, you've got the 1916 Gibson harp guitar. Where did you acquire that?
Well, this guitar here is kind of like it's my talisman. I've had this guitar since the Tea Party got signed to EMI Records in 1993. The president of EMI Records, Dean Cameron, God bless his soul, he was a bit of a guitar collector as well, and he knew that I fancied one of these. And so he went to an auction in Staten Island. It's a music store called Mandolin Brothers. And this guitar from 1916 had been sitting in a woman's attic in like upper Lake Circle, Manhattan. And her brother played this guitar in a guitar quintet in the tens around 1915, and then he had to go off to war. So 1917 he went off to war. But he had this guitar in 1916, got killed in the war. She put it in her attic and was never touched again. So when this guitar came to auction, he bought it for me for like a signing gift for EMI, and it turns out like this is one of like the better like it's in better condition than most that I've seen. Like I know Jimmy Page has one as well, and when I was at his house and I saw his is not so playable, but mine beautifully in place still.
Yeah. And it's actually a forerunner to the double neck guitars, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So like the way that I play this guitar sometimes is the sixth string will be in an alternate tuning, and then these harp strings will be sympathetic to that tuning, and it really resonates. It's very ethereal.
Yeah. You mentioned that some of your instruments, the strings are hard to come by. What about this particular instrument?
This one, not so much. There's a string maker in New York City still called Bella Strings, and they make strings for the harp guitar. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of players out there that play these things. Stephen Bennett's one of the best. Yeah, so like there is a community of harp guitarists out there, so.
Yeah. And are there any albums where this instrument has been a particular star?
For the Tea Party, well, it was played on Shadows on the Mountainside in on the Edges of Twilights, and then I've done other things with it with the band, but these days I just try to keep it at home. It's a bit too precious, and I don't really want to bring it out on the road. So
Yeah, it's a beautiful looking instrument.
yes, thank you.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should look at something else.
All right. Well, speaking of acoustic guitars, so in my humble estimation, one of the finest guitar makers in the world today, acoustic guitar maker. Maton Guitars here in Australia. I love them. I've had a relationship with Maton since the early 2000s, and about a decade ago, we were planning on doing like a signature series for Maton, and they asked me what I wanted for my guitar. And of course, me being me, I said, well, I don't think you guys have ever made a double neck, so why don't we make that the signature? And to my knowledge, right now, like this is a one of a kind. And we still might do it as a custom shop signature series thing, but it's a beautiful guitar to play. And I played it on Cinnamon Rose, a solo record of mine prior to Seven Deadly Sins. And yeah, it's just it's a showstopper when you bring it out.
Yeah. Is that an Andy Allen creation?
It is. It is an Andy Allen creation, yeah.
Yeah, he's actually retired now.
Yes, I know, unfortunately, but this thing needs a little bit of TLC, so I might have to send it to Andy and take him out of retirement for a little bit. So see.
Yeah. Does it have electronics in it, or is it's purely?
It does. Yeah. So and switch between necks, and keep them both on at the same time, which is amazing. Because if the necks are in the same tuning, and if I'm playing this one here and electrically amplified, these 12 strings will resonate with that tuning. So it's kind of Indian in a way.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be nice to see a signature version of that.
Yeah, we shall see.
What else you got there, Jeff?
Well, staying in the acoustic world, this here is my sarod. It's an Indian classical instrument. And as the sitar, the master of sitar is considered to be Ravi Shankar. The master of the sarod was a man named Ali Akbar Khan. And Ali Akbar Khan had a school in San Francisco for classical Indian music. And when the Tea Party was recording in Los Angeles to record The Edges of Twilight, I really wanted one of these for one particular song on the album called Inanna. And so I called up the school in San Francisco, and they actually sold me one of Ali Akbar Khan's personal sarods. And this is probably almost 100 years old as well. And yeah, so it's a beautiful, beautiful instrument to play. It takes some intonation, because there's no frets, and you have to use your nails to actually create the sound. So, which is not good for me sometimes, because if you have too much coffee, I'm biting my nails and can't play it. But yeah, I've used this one on a few different things, and yeah, just love playing this instrument.
Yeah. Normally you go out with the Tea Party and some of your other shows, you have a guitar tech with you.
Yes.
Over the years, how adept have you become at fretted instrument maintenance?
Instrument maintenance. Me? No, I prefer to leave that to the professionals. I've got up here where I live now in the Sunshine Coast, I've got a very good guy at the local music store that's he's a genius, and he handles all my instruments, comes up here maybe once a month to give the guitars, all a good going over. And, there's a lot of guitars, probably in the 40s, something like that. So he's got his hands full.
Yeah. Where did you pick up your education on tuning?
You know what? It started when I was listening to guitarists like John Renbourn, Burt Yanks, Roy Harper. I mean, obviously, like Led Zeppelin. Page has a few tunings as well, but that led me to John Renbourn and that whole English folk scene. And Renbourn's probably my favorite acoustic guitarist. And that man, had a lot of tunings. So that's kind of what sparked my interest. I just love the way it opens up the guitar. And especially if you're playing in a three-piece like I was and I am, I'm trying to make the guitar sound as large as possible, and that's one way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, what's the worst instrument that you have for changing strings?
Um, Probably this thing.
Yeah.
This is very hard to string. So I don't, I play it, I shred very lightly with this one, and I don't really want to break another string on it because it takes like an hour to change one string.
Yeah.
So,
What about miking something like that in the studio?
um, well, I have these on it. These are K&K pickups from Germany. And those are primarily for live, but in the studio, just with my collection of Rode microphones, like I have a beautiful Rode condenser mic, and that tends to handle like the more subtle, fragile acoustic instruments really well.
Yeah. So if you were recording a piece on the Sarod, in general, how many takes would you do?
Um, I don't know. Like usually, I kind of stick to the rule of three takes and keep them all and just pick the one that's best, and don't go overboard on it because I like to, you know, rock music. However, it's meant to have the imperfections in it and the nuances and things like that. So, yeah, I don't get too caught up in perfection when it comes to takes.
I know you have a couple of Les Pauls there. Can we have a look at one of those?
Yeah. This one here, this is my go-to. It's my favorites. It's my studio guitar, and aptly, it's named a Les Paul recording model. This one was from 1971, and the story goes that when Les Paul was asked by Gibson to create the solid body that we now know as the Les Paul, um, the circuitry that he put into that first Les Paul was very similar to this. And as far as passive electronics are concerned, this guitar is amazing. Like the versatility of the sounds that you can get out of it. It can sound like a Strat, a Tele, sound like anything. But Gibson took a look at all these knobs and everything, and they were just like, no way. You gotta simplify that. So that's why we got the classic Les Paul today, which is the two volume pots and the two tones. But this was the guitar that Les Paul really wanted Gibson to put out. And he kept on them and kept on them and kept on them until finally they gave in. And in 1971, they released this guitar. And the problem with this guitar back then, because hard rock was pretty much like the most popular genre and for guitarists, and when this guitar came out, because it has low impedance pickups to keep it nice and quiet in the studio, hard rock guitarists were frustrated because this thing wasn't loud like normal humbuckers or anything. So they would probably try to go in here and rewire it all. But the thing is that when I bought this, it was one of those situations where a guitarist had gone in and rewired it to try to make it louder, but then it wasn't as versatile. It didn't have all the tonal capabilities. So I actually, because I bought this guitar in the 90s, and I went to see Les Paul play in New York, and his technician, Tom Doyle, um, I brought this guitar and got Tom to wire it back to Les Paul's specifications. And now it's my favorite in the studio.
Mm.
So,
How do you like your neck action, the string height?
I play higher than most guitarists. Like, like basically string height versus the pickups. Like that's where I want it. Like I want to get the optimum sound out of guitar pickups. So wherever that string height has to sit in order to do that, that's where. But I don't really play with low action. It's like I like to dig into my guitars.
Yeah. What about picks? Are you fussy about the picks you use?
It's just the Jim Dunlop, the 1 millimeter black ones, the nylon ones. So yeah, heavy picks as well. So I guess I'm just a bit heavy-handed.
Yeah. What about the importance of cables and the quality of cables?
Yeah. Well, I usually leave that up to my guitar tech. I've got some guitar tech in Canada, got one in Perth, got one here, and they all take turns, just taking care of my different situations. So yeah, like cabling, I just go for whatever is the best, whatever they tell me is going to be the best, and I just go with that.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have a look at the Black Betty.
Okay. Yeah, so this guitar, is very, very special to me because it was bequeathed to me by the Tea Party's late manager, Steve Hoffman. Steve was a guitar collector, and so this is a 1968 Black Beauty, Les Paul, and you know, he actually didn't play much guitar. He just liked collecting them, and so when he got sick, he told me that he wanted me to have this, um, and then what I decided to do, because when we opened up for Page and Plant in '96, it was in Montreal. I saw Jimmy play this Les Paul that had this system in it called a Trans Performance that would mechanically, not digitally, but mechanically, with these 6 robotic arms here, tune the guitar to whatever tuning you wanted. And at that time, with our second record, I was probably up to like, 10 or 11 different tunings. And so I called up the owner of the company that makes the circuitry, the trans performance stuff. His name is Neil Trainer, and I called him up in Colorado and sent this guitar to him, got him to put the system in it. And so this guitar is like, it's like NASA, because I know Gibson tried with their machine heads and all that a few years ago, but that didn't work out. But this thing here is probably the best that it can be.
Yeah, I believe it holds over 200 custom tunings.
It does, yes, and I'm up to about 64.
And do you access that through the buttons on the body? I
Yeah,
believe
just here.
you do it.
Yes, basically, every bank would have 6 different tunings, and yeah. And then what I can do is also I have a song that's it was a Tea Party song called "Cathartic" off of Interzone Mantras, and the verses are in an open minor tuning. The chorus is in an open major tuning, like a modal tuning, and then the guitar solo, well, it's in standard tuning. So I can program those 3 tunings in a sequence, and then using a foot switch, I don't even have to touch the buttons, and it'll go to that tuning. So that was pretty impressive. Like when we were playing live, and you just hit the foot switch, and the guitar tunes itself, and there's all this delay on it, and people just thought it was witchcraft.
Yeah. Have you had many technical nightmares in your travels?
With this guitar, yeah, yeah. It doesn't like weather change, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's just the usual stuff. But it's just over time. Like the Tea Party, our arsenal, like my amps, my matchless amps, and my guitar rig and everything. It's all like the best stuff. So when we started out, I was using like old Echoplexes and things like that, and the tapes would go, and using old Marshalls, and the heads would go, and tubes would go. So once we started making some serious money, it was like, okay, I don't want these headaches anymore, so I'm just going to get the best and stick with it.
Yeah. Um, I believe you have another instrument there,
I
the,
do.
the hurdy-gurdy.
Yeah. This beautiful piece of art. So the Tea Party was playing. We were playing a concert in Hobart for the original Edges of Twilight tour, and on that tour, there's a song off of Edges called "The Badger" that I played a hurdy-gurdy as for the intro, but it was a kit, so it was a very minimalistic version of a hurdy-gurdy. Couldn't do really a lot with it, but I got enough out of it to make that intro for the Badger. But it turns out that in the audience in Hobart one evening, there was a kid named Harry Wass, and he had never seen a hurdy-gurdy before. But he was a luthier, or studying to be a luthier. And when he saw me play a hurdy-gurdy, he decided that he was going to start making hurdy-gurdies. And I didn't know this at the time, but many, many years later, I was playing a solo show in Hobart, and he came out to the show and brought one of his hurdy-gurdies for me to see and to tell me the story. And I was blown away. And I think he's the only guy in Australia making hurdy-gurdies. Like it takes like 6 months to make one of these. Yeah. You know, and this one here, this is one of the most beautiful ones I've seen because just the wood that he's used, the sympathetic strings, like it's totally chromatic, where my original one wasn't. So it's like a little symphony in a box, really. I'd play it for you, but it takes about an hour to tune this thing properly. So, and right now it would probably sound like a dying cat. So I'm not going to play it for you, but trust me, when it's in tune, it's beautiful.
You don't have one in the oven that you'd already cooked?
No, I do not. No.
When was the first time you heard the hurdy-gurdy?
First time I heard the hurdy-gurdy, it was just a collection of medieval French music, you know, because I believe that the hurdy-gurdy was actually at one time, like when you know, the rule, like the time of like Louis the 14th or whatever, it was the actual royal instruments of the court. So has its roots all the way back then, and yeah, just listening to like medieval French music, and you know, even Romanian gypsy music has it in it, and yeah, I was just fascinated by it. I just wanted to get my hands on one and see what I could do.
Yeah. In September, you're heading out on the road, playing the Songs of David Bowie, a solo show.
Yeah.
Did you ever get to meet the great man?
I did. Yes, I met him in 1999 at the Canada has its own MTV sort of situation called Much Music, and we were playing the Much Music Awards, and he was one of the special guests, and we got to meet him, and you know, he was a fan of our song "Heaven Coming Down," which blew me away, and he was just a perfect gentleman. You know, everything you would expect from the great man himself.
Yeah. So on the tour that's coming up, are you concentrating on a particular period of his career?
No, I'm trying to like grab, you know, all the stars as much as I can. So I think it's going to be about a 13, 14 song show, but it's definitely taking the best from all of his, you know, different tangents.
Yeah. And what instruments will you be taking out on the road for this tour?
It's primarily just going to be all my Maiden 12-string acoustics, but in different tunings. So definitely putting my own spin on the David Bowie stuff. But it's going to promise to be a great night. You know, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, it's been great to catch up and have a look at your wonderful instruments. It's been quite an education for me, and I'm sure the viewers. And we'll look forward to seeing your Bowie show soon.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Thanks very much.